What was the biggest promise your parents ever broke? I was 16 years old when my little sister Emma was diagnosed with leukemia. Up until that point, our family had been completely normal. We weren't rich, we weren't poor, and we certainly weren't perfect, but we were the kind of family that looked functional from the outside. My parents attended school events, remembered birthdays, and never missed an opportunity to tell everyone how much they loved their children. If you had asked me back then whether my parents would abandon one of their kids during the worst period of her life, I would have laughed in your face. Then the diagnosis came, and everything changed. I still remember the day the doctors confirmed it. Emma had been feeling sick for weeks. At first everyone thought it was a stubborn flu. Then came the bruising, then the exhaustion, then the blood tests. The moment the word leukemia left the doctor's mouth, it felt like all the air disappeared from the room. Emma was only 12. At that age, your biggest concerns should be homework, friends, and what show you're going to watch after dinner. Not chemotherapy, not survival rates, not whether you'll live long enough to graduate high school. My parents were devastated, at least initially. That same evening they sat both of us down in the living room. My mother cried through most of the conversation. My father wrapped an arm around Emma and promised her that she wouldn't face any of it alone. "We're going to fight this together," he said. "No matter what happens," my mother nodded. "We'll be there for every appointment, every treatment, every bad day. We're a family." At the time, I believed every word. Emma did too. For a while, they even meant it. During the first month, my parents were incredible. Dad took family leave from work. Mom practically moved into the hospital. The nurses loved them. Doctors praised them. Whenever Emma woke up scared, one of our parents was there. Whenever she cried, someone held her hand. Whenever she needed encouragement, they gave it. For a brief moment, it felt like maybe we could actually survive this. Then reality settled in, and apparently my parents discovered something they didn't like. Being the parent of a child with cancer wasn't inspiring. It wasn't noble. It wasn't the emotional movie montage people imagine. It was exhausting. It was repetitive. It was terrifying. And eventually, they stopped showing up. At first, the changes were small enough that I ignored them. Dad arrived late to an appointment. Mom stepped out during a treatment session because of a work call. A missed visit here. A shortened stay there. Nothing major. Nothing worth fighting about. But those small absences started becoming routine. Weeks passed, then months. Soon I noticed something disturbing. Whenever Emma had a good day, my parents were around. Whenever things got difficult, they disappeared. If she was smiling, they'd post photos online. If she was vomiting into a basin after chemo, they suddenly had somewhere else to be. Before long, I found myself taking on responsibilities I never expected. I started attending every appointment, at first just to help. Then because someone had to. Emma hated hospitals. She hated the smell. She hated the machines. She hated the endless waiting. Most of all, she hated being alone, so I stayed. I sat beside her while poison dripped into her veins through 4 tubes. I held her hand during procedures. I fetched blankets, water. Medicine. Whatever she needed. When she got sick from chemotherapy, I cleaned up after her. When she was too weak to walk, I helped her move. And every time she asked where Mom and Dad were, I found myself inventing excuses. They're on their way. They got stuck in traffic. Dad's finishing work. Mom will be here soon. Most of the time, I was lying. The hardest part wasn't taking care of her. The hardest part was watching her slowly realize the truth. Children notice more than adults think. Emma noticed every empty chair, every missed visit, every broken promise. She never complained. That somehow made it worse. One afternoon during treatment, she asked me a question I still remember word for word. "Do you think they're tired of this?" I didn't know how to answer, so I lied again. No. But even she didn't believe me. By the 3rd month, my life barely resembled that of a normal teenager. While my friends worried about exams and prom dates, I was learning oncology terminology. I knew medication schedules, blood counts, treatment plans, possible complications. I knew which nurses Emma liked, which doctors explained things clearly, which foods she could tolerate after chemo. I became her translator, advocate, caretaker, and emotional support system. And somehow, my parents seemed relieved to let me do it. Whenever doctors called, they contacted me. Whenever paperwork needed signing, I handled the preparation. Whenever updates were required, I relayed them to my parents afterward. They'd listen for a minute or two, ask a few questions, then move on. It felt like they were discussing a distant relative rather than their daughter. The resentment started building quietly. Not because I minded helping Emma, I'd do it again in a heartbeat. I resented that my parents kept pretending they were involved. Every social media post tainted them as devoted caregivers. Every conversation with relatives featured stories about their sacrifices. Meanwhile, I was sleeping in hospital chairs and missing half of my senior year. Then came the night Emma nearly died. Her fever spiked dangerously high, 104 degrees. The doctors warned us repeatedly about infections because her immune system was practically non-existent. The moment I saw how sick she looked, I rushed her to the emergency room. The entire drive there I called my parents, again, and again, and again. 17 times, no answer, not once. Hours later, while doctors fought to stabilize her, I sat alone in a hospital hallway staring at my phone. The next morning, Dad finally responded. Sorry, phone was on silent, everything okay. I stared at that message for several minutes, everything okay. His daughter had spent the night fighting a potentially fatal infection. No, everything was not okay. Nothing had been okay for months. Emma survived, barely. And my parents still didn't seem to understand what had almost happened. As treatment continued, Emma lost her hair. I helped shave the remaining strands. When it started falling out in clumps, she cried the entire time, so did I. Afterward, I spent hours watching videos online to learn how to tie scarves and head wraps properly because she hated looking in the mirror. When food became unbearable, I researched meal replacements. When nausea destroyed her appetite, I experimented with recipes. When fear kept her awake at night, I stayed awake too. Some nights she'd whisper questions she was too scared to ask anyone else. What if I die? What if the treatment stops working? What if I never get better? I never had good answers. I was 16. I was terrified too. But I sat beside her bed and told her we'd get through it together. Because unlike our parents, I intended to keep my promises. By the time my senior year ended, I barely recognized my own life. My grades suffered. My friendships faded. College applications sat and finished on my desk. I simply didn't have time. Emma needed me more. Meanwhile, my parents seemed to be thriving. Their social media accounts were filled with vacations, concerts, restaurants, and weekend trips. Whenever anyone questioned it, they called them mental health breaks. Apparently their daughter's cancer was exhausting for them. The breaking point arrived during the bone marrow transplant. Doctors explained that Emma would need constant supervision during recovery. 24 hours a day, for 2 weeks. My parents promised we'd share shifts. They swore they'd finally step up. Day 1 went smoothly. Day to change everything. Mom called claiming she had a migraine. Dad had a client dinner. Neither arrived. I stayed. Day 3 came, then day 4, then day 5. Excuses piled up. Work emergencies. Stress, fatigue, headaches, scheduling conflicts. By the end, I had spent all 14 days inside that hospital room. I slept on a tiny cot. Ate vending machine food. Showered in a hospital bathroom. And watched Emma endure one of the hardest experiences of her life. Completely abandoned by the people who had promised to protect her. Months later, when remission finally came, the hospital organized a bell-ringing ceremony. Emma was terrified and excited at the same time. For the first time in nearly a year, there was genuine hope. And suddenly my parents reappeared, dressed perfectly, smiling. They even hired a photographer. The ceremony was beautiful. Emma rang the bell, nurses cheered. Doctors applauded, everyone cried. My parents took hundreds of photos. That evening, social media exploded with emotional posts about their strength, sacrifice, and unwavering dedication. Thousands of likes, hundreds of comments. People praising them as incredible parents. I wanted to throw my phone through a wall. Later that night, I found Emma sitting alone in her room crying. At first I assumed she was overwhelmed. Relieved, emotional. Instead she looked at me and whispered. They act like they were there. I sat beside her. She wiped her eyes. But it was you. I didn't know what to say. Because she was right. After her recovery, I left home as soon as possible. Not because I stopped loving Emma, because I couldn't stand living with our parents anymore. I got a full-time job instead of attending college. Saved every dollar, worked constantly. And 6 months later, I filed for custody. My parents were furious, then confused, then offended. How could I accuse them of neglect? How could I tear the family apart? How could I do this after everything we'd supposedly been through together? The court proceedings were surprisingly short. Medical records told the story better than I ever could. Attendance logs, emergency contacts, signed paperwork, appointment histories. My name appeared everywhere. The judge reviewed everything carefully. Then he asked my parents simple questions. Who was Emma's primary oncologist? What medications had she taken? What complications had occurred during treatment? Neither could answer, not one. I received full custody at 19. Emma moved in with me that weekend. It remains one of the best days of my life. The years that followed weren't easy, but they were honest. Emma got stronger, healthier, happier. We built a real family together. Then came the phone call. 3 years later, Dad had lymphoma. The irony was almost unbelievable. Suddenly they needed help, transportation. Appointments, medication management, emotional support. Everything they'd failed to provide. Mom sounded desperate. We need you. Then she delivered the line that made me laugh out loud. Family sticks together during times like this. Family, the word tasted bitter. Still, I agreed to meet them. Not because I intended to help, because I needed closure. The hospital waiting room looked exactly like every waiting room I'd spent years sitting in beside Emma. The same chairs, the same smell, the same fear. Dad looked terrified, Mom looked exhausted. For a brief moment, I almost felt sorry for them. Then I remembered a 12-year-old girl staring at an empty doorway waiting for parents who never arrived. The nurse eventually appeared and called my father's name. I stood, picked up my jacket, and looked directly at both of them. I hope someone shows up for you. Then I walked away. Neither tried to stop me. Maybe because they finally understood. Or maybe because deep down they knew they'd earned it. I never looked back. That night, Emma and I cooked dinner together in our apartment. Afterward we sat at the kitchen table discussing college applications. She had decided to study oncology, the same field that had once terrified her. The same doctors who saved her life had inspired her future. As she talked excitedly about helping children with cancer someday, I realized something. Our parents had broken the biggest promise imaginable. They promised to be there, and when it mattered most, they disappeared. But in doing so, they accidentally gave Emma and me something stronger than the family we lost. They gave us each other. And unlike them, neither of us has ever broken that promise. Punto clave para miniatura.